It was a marvel of engineering that took 3 years and 3,000 men to build, a floating palace designed to conquer the Atlantic. They called it the Queen of the Ocean. Belfast echoed with the sound of hammering rivets, constructing a hull that was believed to be invincible. But beneath the steel and the grandeur, fate was already writing a different ending. Before the champagne was even poured, the clock was ticking down. On April 10th, 1912, the world watched in awe, unaware that this majestic Leviathan was sailing not just toward New York, but toward a destiny that would shock the world for a century to come. The atmosphere was electric. As the massive whistles blew, signaling the departure from Southampton, over 2,000 souls were on board. From the wealthy aristocrats on the upper decks to the hopeful immigrants in steerage, the Titanic represented the pinnacle of human achievement. It was a celebration of the industrial age. The water was calm, the sky was clear, and the future seemed bright. But as the tugboats guided the behemoth out into the open channel, leaving the cheering crowds behind, the ship was leaving the safety of the known world and entering an unforgiving wilderness where nature, not man, made the rules. In 1912, the Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a floating city of unprecedented opulence. It was marketed as the most luxurious and the most powerful vessel ever launched. The White Star Line, with a fleet of over 100 ships, had bet their reputation on its class of superliners. To captain this flagship, they chose Edward Smith, a man with 40 years of experience, a millionaire's captain. The construction at Harland and Wolff was a testament to excess. Yet in the pursuit of luxury and size, the fundamental laws of safety were being stretched. The ship was beautiful, yes, but beauty offers no protection against the jagged ice of the North Atlantic. As the coast of England faded from view, the passengers settled into their cabins, blinded by the brilliance of the ship's reputation, unaware that the price of their ticket did not guarantee their survival. The first fatal mistake didn't begin on the bridge. It began in the boardroom. Pressure to arrive in New York early, to make headlines and prove the ship's grandeur. But the Titanic wasn't built for speed. Yet Captain Smith ordered the remaining boilers to be lit. The ship was pushed to near its top speed, a decision that would leave no margin for error. In maritime safety, speed kills reaction time. And time was now a luxury the Titanic didn't have. A stark contrast between the lessons of history and the pressures that ignored them. Mistake number 2 was a failure of communication. The technology of the time, the Marconi wireless radio, was a novelty used primarily for wealthy passengers to send stock tips and greeting cards. On April 14th, the radio room was overwhelmed with personal messages. Because of this backlog, critical ice warnings from other ships were treated as annoyances. The ship Mesaba sent a warning of heavy pack ice and large icebergs directly in Titanic's path. That message never reached the bridge. The radio operators were employed by the telegraph company, not the White Star Line. The ocean that night was deceivingly calm. There was no moon, and the water was flat as a mill pond. This sounds peaceful, but for sailors, it is a nightmare. Without waves breaking against the base of an iceberg, there is no white foam to spot in the darkness. The black ice blends perfectly with the black sea and the black sky. Inside, the music played and the wine flowed, but outside, the temperature was plummeting. The lookouts in the crow's nest were staring into a void, looking for a shadow within a shadow, stripped of the one natural indicator that could have given them a warning: bricking water. Mistake number 3 is a tragedy of bureaucracy. The lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, did not have binoculars. Why? Because the key to the locker holding them was in the pocket of Second Officer David Blair, who had been transferred off the ship just before departure. He forgot to hand over the key. Relying only on their naked eyes, the lookouts were effectively flying blind, less than 500 yards away. "Iceberg, right ahead!" They had only 37 seconds to react. Mistake number 4, the evasive maneuver. First Officer Murdoch ordered hard a starboard to turn the ship left, but he also ordered the engines to reverse. This was a fatal error. The ship's rudder was small for its size, and it needed water rushing past it from the propellers to turn effectively. By reversing the engines, the water flow slowed down, making the rudder less effective. The Titanic turned sluggishly. If they had hit the iceberg head-on, the ship likely would have survived with a crushed bow. Instead, they swiped the side, opening a fatal wound along the starboard flank, dooning the vessel. Mistake number 5 was hidden in the construction itself. We now know that the builders used lower-grade iron rivets for the bow and stern because the giant steel press couldn't fit there. These rivets were filled with slag impurities. When they hit the ice, the heads didn't just bend, they snapped off like glass. Furthermore, the watertight bulkheads didn't go all the way up. As the bow dipped, water simply spilled over the top of one compartment into the next, like an ice cube tray filling up. It was a mathematical certainty. The ship wasn't unsinkable. It was a metal balloon waiting to be punctured. By midnight, the reality began to set in. The mailroom was flooded. The squash court was underwater. Captain Smith knew the ship was doomed, yet the general alarm was never sounded to avoid mass panic. Many passengers in first class simply didn't believe that it was danger. The ship was so steady, the night so calm. The band played ragtime music to keep spirits up, a surreal soundtrack to a developing nightmare. Down below, the engineers fought a losing battle to keep the lights on, sacrificing their lives to buy the passengers' precious minutes. The unsinkable ship had less than 2 hours to live. The final and perhaps most cruel mistake was the lifeboats. The Titanic carried enough boats for only half the people on board. Even worse, the regulations of the time were outdated, based on ship tonnage, not passenger count. But the tragedy was compounded by human error. The crew, afraid the davits couldn't hold the weight, launched them half empty. Lifeboat number 7, the first to leave, carried only 28 people despite having room for 65. Nearly 500 seats, 500 lives were wasted simply because the crew was untrained and the officers were paralyzed by the enormity of the situation. As the bow plunged deeper, the angle of the deck became steep. The calm vanished. It was no longer women and children first. In some places, it was women and children only. Fathers said goodbye to daughters, husbands to wives, handing them into boats they would never step foot in. Distress rockets fired into the sky, exploding with a boom that echoed across the empty Atlantic. But the nearest ship, the Californian, saw them and didn't react, thinking it was a party. Titanic was truly alone. At 2:17 a.m., the strain on the hull became too great. With a sound like thunder, the great ship tore apart. The stern rose vertically, pausing for a moment as if gasping for air, before sliding beneath the surface. It took only 2 hours and 40 minutes for the world's greatest engineering marvel to become a tomb at the bottom of the ocean. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the noise. The water was 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 Celsius. It wasn't drowning that killed most of the victims, it was hypothermia. Water, only 6 were pulled out alive by the lifeboats that returned. The rest froze in their lifebelts. When the dawn broke, revealing a calm sea littered with wreckage, the rescue ship Carpathia arrived. Found only 705 survivors. The silence of the ocean had swallowed the rest. The sinking of the Titanic changed the world. It shattered the arrogance of the industrial era. Because of this tragedy, maritime laws were rewritten. The International Ice Patrol was formed, and ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for every soul on board. The Titanic rests today 12,000 feet down, a rusting monument to human error and hubris. We look back not just to remember the tragedy, but to learn from it. Myth was unsinkable, but the reality was all too fragile. In the end, nature always has the final say.